All right, in our discussion now, continuing about rest, it's important to actually talk about this idea of uh, idempotent and whether things are safe. So whether requests are idempotent and whether they're safe. Or we could talk about the idempotency, idempotency and safety. All right, that's hard. I'm going to stick to idempotent. What does idempotent mean? Sounds like it belongs in Harry Potter. So no, idempotent can make. The idea here is that these are about requests. Our requests are that we're going to make to our API. They can be characterized as idempotent or not, and safe or unsafe. All right. So if you are an idempotent request, you can make this the same request repeatedly with the same effect and leaving the server in the same state. So this does not mean that the server doesn't change state when you make this request. What it means is that after the request is over, the server will be in this state. And if I make the request again, the server will also be in that state. And so I always end up with the server in the same state after I make the request. Okay. So let's look at some more details here. So what this means is that an idempotent request has no side effects other than, you're allowed to certainly keep some stats. I got this many requests and things like that, but that's not really the state of the server. We're talking about, the models and the database and things like that. So there's no side effects other than what we expected to actually occur. Okay, so if we go to delete something, we delete it. It's not like there's anything else that we didn't know about. We should know everything about what our request does. So there's no hidden changes to us. We only consider this with regard to the back end. So we're talking about the API for the server, the back end of the system. Okay. Certainly. So again, when we make these requests, we get return codes back. So sometimes we get success, we might get failure, we might get a redirect. So return codes may differ on our requests. So for an example, you could make multiple calls to delete and try to delete. You're going to delete a resource. So, I want to delete this book. Okay. Your first one succeeds and it sends back 200, a success. Yes, I successfully deleted that for you. You say, I want to delete that book, and it's the same book. Well, the second one fails. The book's gone. Okay, and you probably are going to get something like a 404 or something like that. Like, I can't delete it for you. That's a failure. Note that the first one, it gets rid of that book. The second one, well, the book's still gone. So it's idempotent. The server is in the same state, and I can call delete till the cows come home, and it's not going to result in any differences to things. All right. So compare that and contrast that to like a post, where a post is, let's say I want to create a new book. And I want to create a book with, this title or something. And assuming there's not integrity constraints to prevent different book titles, every time I say create with these posts, I'll get another book made. So it's not idempotent. I put the server in a new state every single time. It keeps creating objects. So post is the classic thing that's an example of something that's not idempotent. Yeah, so I was about to actually say that. I have said that. What are the classic things to be idempotent? Well, when you write the API for your app, there's a head. We haven't ever talked about that, but there is a head. We won't talk about that further. Put and delete should be coded so to be idempotent. So the reality is the reason to know this is if you were to put something behind a GET request that wasn't idempotent, every time someone did the GET, it could change the server. And that's not what you're supposed to do. The idea is when these come in, they're idempotent. The server always ends up in the same state, and you will repeat it. The same thing will happen. Post is not, and patch is not, but we use patch in Rails often in a idempotent way. So this is what can be confusing. You're like, well, wait a minute. Every time I do edit a resource with a patch, database ends up in the same state. So yes, it could be used in an idempotent fashion, but it doesn't. By default, it could also be used not in one. Whereas these should only ever be used in an idempotent fashion. Whereas post and patch, when you design your API, you're welcome to make them not be idempotent, okay? Sure, you might have some requests that are, but the nature is, so someone reading your API or a client using it is going to know, ooh, these guys may not be idempotent. These guys should be idempotent. So if I need to reissue a GET, I can reissue a GET without fear that I'm changing the server. Well, what about safety? So we talked about there's idempotency, and then there is safety. So is a request a safe request or not? So a safe request means the method does not change the state of the server, period. So this is, I make the state before my request and the state after my request is exactly the same. Okay. Some things to note. So what is this notion of safety? It's really sort of an advertisement to the client. So you who's making calls to the API, let's say you're using someone else's API. If it's a safe request, it's okay to do it without fear. You're not going to change the server, okay? If it's a unsafe request, you should think twice about it. And the way to kind of think about this is you go into a museum and there's a display and they got all these buttons, and it's for the public. Pressing any button is safe. Those are all safe requests. Now you go into a nuclear power plant and you see a bunch of buttons. You probably know we shouldn't go around pressing buttons in a nuclear power plant. Many of them may not be safe requests. Okay, you could change the nuclear reactor in ways that is a bad idea. So it's kind of that way. There are some requests to your API that people will know, oh, that's safe, I can do it without fear. And others, I should know what I'm doing before I make that request, because that is an unsafe request, which means it's going to change the server in some fashion. To note, though, it is okay for a safe request to be a generated dynamic response. So, for example, you request the current temperature. Well, you're going to get back a different answer at different times. It's still safe to do. It doesn't change the state of the server. Doesn't delete things, add things and stuff. It's just going, let's go read the sensor and give it the back. So that's still a safe thing for you to have happen. A big thing here is that get should always be safe. And this thus means don't put actions behind a get that change state. That is bad API design, okay? Because the client expects it to be safe. So let's take a quick rundown of these and what do these requests and our verbs typically mean in our API design and whether they're safe and idempotent. So we have get. So these are our HTTP verbs. It's safe and it's idempotent. And the idea behind get is always to retrieve. It's the R in CRUD. It's to retrieve a whole resource in some representation. So it might come back as HTML, it might come back as JSON, but we're going to do a get and we're going to get back a resource to us. Put is not safe, but it is idempotent. Put is to insert or replace a complete representation of a resource. We're not using puts in Ruby on Rails, we're using patches. Puts, you might see them used if you had this notion of a store resource where the user is able to store things, so they would use puts for that. But we use patches, and patches are not safe and they're not idempotent. So patches can change things a lot. In contrast to a put, they modify a resource. Okay, they're there for modifying a resource. So it's not stick a whole thing in or replace a whole thing, it's change some parts of it. But the patch, in addition, so again, that could be idempotent, and it could be, it would never be safe because it's changing, but it could be idempotent. But often a patch is allowed to do other stuff. And so that's why we don't by default have it be declared to be idempotent, because it could actually be, each time you call, you could actually do something different with a patch. And note that this is for the Rails, this is the Rails standard now to use for editing things, not to use the put. Where if you read old documentation about Rails, they used to use put, and then they realized they really shouldn't. All right, people learn over time. Delete is to remove a resource. And and our but it is idempotent. It'll always be in that same state. Posts are neither, and a post is, its whole idea is to create a new resource in a collection or run a command. Which the idea of running a command is it's going to execute a controller. It's going to call a controller resource. So we use posts with the controller resources. So to note, though, some things that to post a document resource is an error. So we don't ever post. So if we have a URI that represents a document resource, so it's a single entity, to call post on that is a mistake. We're posting to collection. Okay, so we post to collection resources or to a controller resource. And likewise, to post to store resource is also an error. So the only time that you're posting is when you're going to post to a collection or posting to a controller resource to execute the function of it. All right, I'm going to stop here and then resume in just a moment.